Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Hi, everyone. Good day, good evening. It's so nice to have you here on USA Global TV and Radio. I'm Dr. JACALYN KERBECK, and our show today is Your Story, Your Grief, Your Journey, where we explore all facets of grieving. And we're here to help people. If you'd like to share your story, we'd love to have you come and join us. Go to our website, usaglobaltv.com/book your session. Our topic today is exploring why some men pull away when they are grieving. Joining us is an expert in this area. His name is Doug Lawrence. He's joining us from Canada, and he's an international certified competent mentor, an international best-selling author, and he's here with us to share his story and his wisdom. Welcome to the program, Doug.
Hello, and welcome to our viewers and listeners all across the world. And thank you for taking time to join us, no matter where you are. We're glad that you're part of our journey.
We certainly are. Yes, for sure. Doug, this topic is very interesting. And I found that in my experience, men will pull away for a number of reasons, but especially when they're grieving. What's your experience been like in this area?
It's been predominantly much the same, where I know I personally will pull away from, while I'm going through the grieving process, I will pull away from all sorts of different things, large groups. I actually I was at a function on the weekend, and it was a larger group than what I'm normally accustomed. And I found that after a period of time, about an hour and a half, maybe a little bit longer than that, it was time for Doug to exit stage right and basically head home. And what I found was that you didn't want to be that person who it was a celebration, and you didn't want to be the person that dragged it down. So for me, the best possible thing that I thought I could do in order to minimize that from happening was to actually say my goodnights and leave and go home. And so, I was pulling away from the social interaction piece because I'm going through the grieving process. And there's probably a number of other things, but that's definitely gives our listeners an idea of what can take place and some of the things that we need to be able to deal with. So,
Doug, when we think about pulling away, obviously we physically can pull away, but are there some other indications that someone is pulling away without it being that blunt?
Part of it is tied to the aspect of just not accepting, the person's not accepting the loss that they're experiencing. So like in my case, with my wife, Deborah, she, there were times where I had a difficult time. It was like, pinch me, wake me up from this horrible dream or nightmare. This can't be happening, and dealing with it that way. And so I was struggling with trying to actually accept the loss of her, and then wrestling with what what does that actually mean? So what has that done to me as an individual, and you know, and sort of my life has kind of been taken in a can and turned upside, or shaken and turned upside down. And now I need to figure out what it is that, or where it is that I'm going to go from that point onwards.
Is it possible when people are pulling away that they will put their energy and their focus into something else? Like, for example, they just go straight back to work and they're just working day and night and they're really not doing anything socially?
There is, and I've experienced that myself. I remember when my mom passed away many years ago, that I went back to work within probably 3-4 days. She passed on the 16th of December, and I was back to work just after Christmas. And part of that is that can become part of your healing journey. That can be therapeutic, to some extent. So you need to sort of understand, okay, why am I going back so early? And if I am going back, sort of what are defining what the expectations are for that is really important as well. So, I think that being able to, and I still do that even today now that I start to think about it, is that I'm using work as part of my healing journey. It's the therapeutic piece that I need to have in my life in order for me to be able to move forward. I won't, is that the sort of the be all end all? Is that the answer? And no, it's not, because I find myself the last little while, I'm going through another phase where I'm picture watching. I'm going through photo albums and looking at different pictures of us and of Deborah by herself, and having those, those thoughts, I guess, about, what life would be like if she was still here with me. And it becomes difficult. So I think, the point I'm trying to make is that I then take myself to a place where I retreat, and I trying to wrestle with my thoughts and my emotions in order to be able to decide what is it that I need to do to get beyond that, and what is it that I need to do. Can I leverage some of those thoughts and feelings as part of my healing journey?
Well, I really appreciate you just being so open and honest with us. And I'm wondering, Doug, is it ever possible in your experience working with your clients that someone may have come to terms with the fact that they were losing someone? In other words, it wasn't a sudden accident, but they knew the person was going to pass based on the health diagnosis. And that while they were alive, they were able to come to terms with it and grieve as the person was passing, and then go back to their life. Is that ever possible, or is that just kind of something that's a fairy tale?
It's wishful thinking more so than a fairy tale. I think it when I, like, Deborah was diagnosed in December with cancer and passed in February. So the time frame in there was very, very brief. And it, on the positive side, I guess, it gave us a chance to very quickly realize we needed to get some things in place, and we needed to have some very heartfelt conversations and discussions. She was more the rock than I was. I had a difficult time with, and it's strange now that I think of it, because in our normal life without cancer and without grief and all of that to deal with, the roles were somewhat reversed, where I was always the one that, was kind of the rock, the go-to person. And, Deborah would display emotions and that a lot easier than what I would. I was definitely the rock. And then where we got into the situation where we had to have those meaningful conversations, it became evident, number one, that I was going to be leaning on her to sort of guide where we needed to go, and I needed her to tell me what she needed me to do, so that, it was stuff that she didn't have to deal with, and I would maybe touch base or validate that here's what I'm thinking, here's what I think we need to do. What do you think? And get that validation from her. But the do men pull away when they're grieving? Yes, they do. And, a large part of that is because I think they don't want to outwardly display that. And I know I was somewhat like this, outwardly display that they're actually going through a grieving process. And it becomes very, it's like the stigmatism if they outrightly say, well, I'm going through a grieving process and this is how I feel, and you can support me by doing this and this and this. They're concerned how they would be viewed, by people that they're talking to, by sort of saying, just get over it and get on with life and stuff like that. And it's not that easy. It's a lot more challenging than that for most people, and even more so, I think, for men who have a difficult time with accepting the fact that their partner that was supposed to be for life has exited, and now they need to figure out how they're going to be able to move forward, and how they're going to deal with that. And I went through that, and some days I'm latching out and trying to grab onto something that probably isn't there. And it's a matter of, we need to figure that out, because you can't just sit on that perpetual circle and go nowhere. You have to be able to get a better understanding of it, come up with the coping mechanisms that you need to move forward, and then move forward.
Yeah, great points that you shared there. And thanks for just really helping us understand why men do pull away. I've seen on the opposite side where when a man loses his spouse, that he when I say immediately, very quickly wants to go and meet someone else so that he's not alone. Have you seen this, or have you know anyone that has experienced this?
Yeah, it's kind of hit home when you mentioned that, because both, my father and my father-in-law both did much the same sort of thing, where they reached out to find somebody else. I know my dad was fortunate, and it was kind of one of these things where, he was fortunate that he found somebody that was almost like my mom, like my mother. And it was what, and she needed somebody as well. So call it a match or whatever you want to do it. The two of them getting together satisfied both their needs. And I know my father-in-law, on the other hand, he was somewhat the same, but trying to figure out his rationale, I think it was that he was trying to fill a bit of a void that was there, by hooking up with somebody else. And it ended up at the end of the day that he passed before anything of any significance could get going. But what I found interesting was that both parents went down that same path, where they very quickly were looking for and found somebody that could be part of their journey and moving forward. I know with my dad that he remarried this lady, and she was an absolutely wonderful person. Absolutely, I couldn't ask for, somebody else that was going to, be there for him, to give him happiness and all of those things. She was the right person for him. With my father-in-law, it's one of those unanswered questions, and I don't have the answer as to why he picked who he picked and all of that, without getting into probably a long story, longer than what we have time for.
So in those cases, though, the relationships actually worked. I use
Yes.
worked in air quotes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we don't necessarily have to go through all the steps, the stages, and get closure before we meet someone else? Or is it really just a matter of both people compromising and certain subjects aren't discussed?
That the topic of closure is one that is it's very interesting, and it's important to me, and let me share with our audience why. So for me, closure is that I'm satisfied that, and we'll use my mom and Deborah as sort of my examples. I needed to have closure, so I needed to know that the two of them they were okay. They were in a place of unconditional love, and they were okay wherever, where they were, or where they are, I guess is probably more appropriate. So when I look at my definition of closure, I didn't see it in the purest sense in my father, and I definitely, didn't see closure in my father-in-law's situation. It wasn't important to him, and I'm not even sure that there was an understanding or comprehension of or a definition by his standards as to, what is closure and what does it mean in his case. What did it mean to him, if it meant anything? And, to some extent, the same thing with my dad is that closure for him, I think, was finding somebody else. And, did he still, did he still, how am I going to word this? Did he still have a space, a part of mom still in his heart? And I think that was there, but there was this new recharged vigor at wanting to cement a relationship with the new person that he had found, and move forward with that. And so, in his case, I think he was maybe a little bit closer to my definition of closure, but still quite a ways away from where I thought he could be.
I think that's really interesting when we think about closure and what that looks like for each one of us. What about in your experience when we don't go through the stages, the steps of grieving, and the impact it has ultimately on our health? Is there any correlation that you've seen?
There's quite a bit. There's definitely the aspect of, grief does, and, we need to think of grief as part of that whole mental health space. And so, and I know for myself, I've noticed that I've made more trips to the doctor since Deborah's passed than I did ever before. And it's probably, when I think of it, it forced me to take ownership of my own health, where, before that, Deborah would be the one that would say, well, I think we should go get this done, or we should do this, or, the next time you're meeting, or let's set up a doctor's appointment and all that sort of stuff. I think that I'm in a place now where I need to kind of look after my own health, because there's no one else that's going to do it for me. And what I'm starting to realize is that, I've got some heart issues that I'm dealing with. I have a pacemaker that was put in a year after Deborah passed. So Deborah passed in February. Actually, it would be less than a year. And I went for surgery in January of the following year. So, there's that part. And I'm, I'm not sleeping as soundly as what I would like to. So I've got that. And then, I'm trying to find coping mechanisms, and some of them are probably not the best sort of thing. So, for me, unhealthy coping mechanisms can also be diet and food related, where I'm reaching out, I'm having my little container of chips that I'll have as sort of my treat at the end of the day. I probably could do better for myself if I were to find something else that could fill that gap or that void. But we don't really truly understand that, especially with grief, that it does have that impact. I look at it sort of as much the same as stress. And what I found that with stress is, if I don't manage stress, it will manage me. And what I've also found, and I've seen it in other relationships, is that stress can actually be an accelerator to dementia, as an example. And I saw that in my father-in-law and my mother-in-law, where the relationship wasn't all that horribly great. And as a result of that, her dementia went into a faster gear, and she ended up getting sick, and then she ended up with cancer as a result of all of that stuff as well. So I think we're only fooling ourselves if we go, well, grief's not going to be an issue for me. If you're not paying attention to it, it will definitely take over, and it will manage you, and you won't be managing it. So I think, you want to make sure that you're cognizant of all of that.
So with the surgery that you had, and again, thank you for being so candid about that, you definitely feel that that's a direct correlation to Deborah's passing.
It fast tracked what the final outcome was, because I had some issues before that. So atrial flutter, I think, is what they call it. And so I would have times where my heart rate would escalate very quickly. And I think it was 3 times or 4 times where I actually passed out as a result of my heart rate getting to a certain level and not being able to adjust it to get it back to normal. So my body's reaction was to pass out, and I did that. And Deborah was still with me when all of that took place, and with me as in she was still alive. In most of those cases, I remember one happened at home, one happened at a coffee shop, and one happened when I was visiting some dear friends out in British Columbia, where we were socializing and getting caught up and stuff like that. And I remember I got up to help clean up the kitchen area, and then we were going to bed, and the lights went out, boom, down I went. And it was scary. It was scary. And on top of it, Deborah was back here at home, and I was, 1,000 miles away or whatever it was, and had to sort of deal with stuff on my own then. Should have known that was a taste of what it's going to be like going forward, where now, anything health related, I have to, for the most part, deal with it on my own. I lean on my daughter and my son, more so on my daughter. I lean on her quite a bit for, more so about feeding me the information I need to make an informed decision about my health. That's probably the value add that she'll always bring to the equation.
It's great that you have them as a support structure for you. Something that comes to mind is when people make grief part of their life. So, in other words, undertakers, for example, or people who own funeral homes, or people who work in hospitals where that's the last place that somebody's going to go, or hospice, and they see death all the time. And you think that even if they don't have that personal connection, it still has to leave an impact, wouldn't you think?
Well, it does, because I remember when I was in the police force, and we dealt with death a fair amount, and in some cases you were kind of the what's the be all end all, so to speak, because I remember a young lad, 16 years of age, who went home to tell his mom and dad he made the hockey team, and they were completely inebriated, had been drinking all day, and they were not in any state to, provide him the positive feedback that he needed at that stage. And so he went in the bedroom and found the rifle, and it was death by suicide. And, I ended up getting called to investigate, and it was the middle of winter, 40 below weather, and we were 8 hours to the closest hospital or morgue, and I ended up having to, transport his body to that facility. So it was, 40 below, 8-hour drive on the, lots of snow-covered gravel roads. It was a challenging trip, and interesting enough, Deborah was actually working up there at the time, and I can't remember if she was working then or if we had gone on a holiday and had come back. It doesn't matter. She ended up going with me. She got, as we jokingly used to say, she drew the short straw and had to accompany me on that, and we made the trip. And but there's an example of, I had all of that stuff that I was dealing with, and I was, close friends with the young lad who passed away, death by suicide, that it had an effect. And obviously it must have had an effect, because it's one of the things that I share with people to this very day. And gosh, that goes back to 1977, I think it was. So 1977, when this all took place, and it's still fresh. I can still see, images and all that fresh in my mind. And it's not, so people in, like you mentioned, hospice, palliative care, the hospitals, all of that, where, they have to deal with that on a daily basis. It takes its toll as well from a mental health perspective. And we need to provide a support structure that gives them the opportunity to talk about what it is that they've just gone through and how it makes them feel and all of that. Because the worst thing that you could probably end up doing is keeping all of that internalizing all of that the grief and the trauma that you've just experienced.
Wow, that's unbelievable, Doug. When you think back to that at that time, do you feel that you may have pulled away yourself as a result of being part of this experience?
Definitely. And part of the reason why was the fact that we had no support structure. And, there were some things that you would have loved to have shared, but can't, because of obviously the confidentiality and all that sort of stuff. I developed an inner circle, and it was only a handful of people that I may, and the operative word is may, share with. And for the rest of it, it all ends up inside me. And I have to figure, okay, how am I going to cope with this? How am I going to, how am I going to deal with, things like that, so that I'm okay. So the self-care is the big thing. So I'm taking care of myself and able to move forward with that. And, that was just one example. There were a number of other examples. And, I still have images of all of those as well, even to this day. So it can be something that is hard to shake off, and you need to have that coping structure in place that allows you to be able to do that.
And I think about people who serve in the military and have to experience this on a regular basis. And it's just hard to imagine seeing what you've seen and seeing what other people see, and then being able to have a sense of peace.
Yeah, excuse me, I mentor, so I'm part of an organization called American Corporate Partners, and what they do is they provide mentors to work with service personnel who are transitioning from service life to civilian life. And I know with some of the people that I've been working with that they have witnessed witnessed is probably the best word. They've witnessed some horrible tragedies, very traumatic events and the triggers that they have to deal with on a daily basis are just, it's so difficult for most of us to understand, like going to a fair and the fireworks going off and you end up turtling under something because the first thought that comes to mind is the aspect of, you're under fire and somebody's lobbing bombs or whatever it is, and you're going through all of that. My heart went out to each and every one of those service persons that I was asked to work with. My heart went out with them, because while I didn't experience what they did, I had, trauma and grief that I was dealing with myself with the situations that I found myself in. So, it's sometimes, we need to take that step back and sort of think about, okay, maybe it's not quite as bad as what I think it is, but I'm sure that somebody else is experiencing worse, and now I know that is the case.
Yeah, absolutely. And Doug, I'm wondering, with the last few minutes we have of our show, a couple of things. If you can speak to our audience directly, if you are someone who is pulling away, what can you do? And if you're with someone who's pulling away from you, what can you do?
I definitely can, certainly from my perspective, and I can provide some advice, but what's interesting for me is that, why do men pull away when grieving? Well, I think part of that is the stigmatism, and I've gone to some support groups, and I've observed men who were there because I think somebody had suggested that they needed to go to this support group, and once there, then two things. Number one, they looked at it from the aspect of, okay, this isn't for me because I'm okay. I'm able to deal with my grief and all of that. No, you're not, because part of the issue here is that if we internalize all that grief, it doesn't do us any good with our ability to be able to heal. So we need to take care of that. The other part is that there's also in those group settings, there's the stigmatism that I don't know why I'm here because I'm okay. I'm healthy. I'm able to deal with things. But oh, maybe while I'm here, I'll just see, who else is here, and maybe there's somebody I can hook up with, and move forward with a new relationship. And you know, to be honest, that is not a fair approach to take, because I suppose if it's two consenting adults, it's maybe not as big a deal. But for me, when I take a look at that, is I want to be respectful of whoever it is that I'm talking to. I want to be respectful of what it is they're going through. And I don't want to complicate or make things, any worse for what it is that they're experiencing. I want to be able to be there to maybe listen and hear what it is that they're dealing with, and let them know that, if you need to talk, if you need to reach out, please feel free to do so. But it's really, and I don't honestly know the answer, because I saw both my father and father-in-law fall in love, and the definition is kind of loose at this particular stage as to what that actually meant for the two of them. But I saw the two of them fall into something, a relationship, into love, as a means for them to deal with it. That was their coping mechanism. And you have to ask yourself, was that the right approach for them to take? And only they can answer that. But there's a lot of variables there that needed to be looked at before any decisions like that could actually be put into action. And so I make sure, I guess bottom line here is, make sure that both of you, if this is the path you're going to take, that both of you understand what's involved in the starting of a new relationship while you're still going through the grieving process with the old relationship. And so understand what that means and what that looks like, because it's not fair to you, but it's also not fair to the other person as well.
I'm so glad you shared that, because I've actually heard people talk about, I'm going to go to a support group meeting and see if I can meet somebody. And it's kind of like, that's when a person is really at their most vulnerable and probably not able to make a decision on that level at that time, at that location.
No, definitely not. And, those support groups are not designed or built to act as a dating game event. So people just need to know that and be respectful of that. I've done the group therapy thing, and it was absolutely phenomenal. And there was some absolutely wonderful people there, but who were going through the grieving process as well. And I needed to be respectful of that, as much as you may want to, try and see if they'd be interested in connecting. Not the right thing to do. Not the right thing.
Doug, we have you on Spotlight with your information, but for people who can't read it, tell us a little bit about Anytime Mentoring and the value that you bring to our audience.
Well, Anytime Mentoring, it was something that I came across here not too long ago, but basically the concept behind Anytime Mentoring is that your access to a mentor is something that you can have at any time, day or night, so to speak. And I know that seems to be difficult to understand, but I know when I take a look at the mentoring practice that I have, my mentees know that they can reach out to me at any time outside of our scheduled time together. So I do leadership mentoring, and I'm working with an organization, and they all know that they can reach out, and a lot of them have done that. They can reach out to me outside of our normal, regular, scheduled time frames. And so Anytime Mentoring provides that capability for people who need help to be able to reach out at that particular time. Now, if you want to, talk more about this and you want to find out more about it, or if you just want to have a conversation with me about anything in general, you can check out my website at www.talentc.ca and go to the contact button and just fill in your information and it'll come to me. But it's probably easier for you to just send me an email at doug.lawrence@TalentC, so the word talent with the letter C on the end, .ca, and I'll do my very utmost to get back to you as soon as I possibly can.
Thank you so much, Doug. And thank you to those of you who are watching or listening live and also in the replay. We will be running this show again a couple more times later today. And you can always go to our YouTube channel and look for the playlist, Your Story, Your Grief, Your Journey. Doug and I will be right back with our next show. So please do stay with us for stories of hope and inspiration and overcoming adversity. We will be back shortly. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Doug. Great show.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.